Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. We will get started in about 30 seconds. Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and get started. I said good morning before, but it may be afternoon for some of you. This is Kelly Trowell from Oporto, and you have joined a live discussion today with IT leaders from higher ed to talk about some of the ways that they are preparing for the fall semester and all of the change that comes with that. On behalf of Oporto and our panelists, I thank everybody for joining. We've got a lot of content to cover and a very large audience, so we're going to get right into it. I do want to let you know that all attendees are muted. However, we do really want to encourage questions. So you do have a question panel on your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have a question that's directed at a specific speaker, please indicate that on the question, and we'll make sure that we get that question to the speaker. We will do our very best to make sure that all of the questions are answered, either in real time as they come up, or at the end of the webinar, we'll have an open Q&A time as well. This session will be recorded. And without further ado, let's get right to our panelists. I'd like each panelist to introduce themselves, tell us your name, your role, the school that you represent, and maybe just a couple of words about the learning models that the university is using in the fall. We're going to go ahead and start on the West Coast with Orlando and then Chris.
Just unmuted myself. Good morning, everybody. My name is Orlando Leon, and I'm so glad to be able to be here today, even if it's virtually. My name is Orlando Leon. I am the Vice President for IT and CIO at California State University in Fresno. And we've been getting ready for the fall since the middle part of the spring. I think as we were progressing through the early parts of March and April, things were changing by the day. So it was actually really hard to anticipate what to think about how fall will look like. And of course, as many of you have been following the news, things aren't getting much better. Central Valley in California is also a hot spot. So we are preparing for a minimal number of people coming in for those types of classes and instruction where it is impossible to, let's say, do credit hours or other requirements for accreditation without being in person. So we have a model where about 5% of our courses are going to be fully in person, but of course done safely. That might include plexiglass, tape on the ground, things like that. And to supplement that, we'll do lecture capture. We'll probably do other means to try to help people have a way to catch up, for example, and then everything else will be remote. Now, that being said, if the governor or something else were to say close down everything, we are also needing to have a plan to go back fully virtually. So that's the plan for Cal State Fresno.
Great, and then Chris, also from Fresno.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Christopher Cruz. I'm with Fresno State, and I did a lot of the work in leading the Oporto implementation at Fresno State.
Okay, now over to the middle of the country, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Carroll. I am the lead of a platforms group in the College of Arts and Sciences at Northwestern University. In the fall, we will be sort of piloting a hybrid approach with students on campus and remote.
Great. And then our East Coast University, Mac Pauley.
Hello, my name is Mac Pauley, and I am from Middlebury. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my webcam today, so I'm going to have no video on. So our plan, we have an undergraduate college as well as a graduate program, the Monterey Institute, and we have different plans for both of them. The graduate programs are going to be fully online with no on-campus component, whereas the college is going to be primarily in person on campus, but with very different restrictions as to physical distancing, and even those students that are on campus, they may well still participate in some of their classes remotely, depending on the faculty being available for in person or not. So definitely a hybrid model for the fall semester.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank everybody for being here. And moderating the discussion today are Heather Wasserline and Max Lucian. Heather is a VP of Product Management for Oporto, and Max is the VP of Customer Success. Both Heather and Max have been working closely with universities and colleges in this rush to get things ready to support the new learning models. So they will be leading off with questions. And Heather, do you want to begin?
Sure thing. Thank you, Kelly, and thanks in advance to all the panelists who are joining today. So certainly this spring, there was a massive shift to remote learning. And we chose all of you guys to come speak today because you were able to make that shift and to do it very quickly. So we wanted to get your perspectives. We thought it would be useful to the audience to hear your stories. And so to start off, we wanted to ask if each of you can tell us about the changes that you made this spring, particularly for courses that required access to a computer lab or to specialized software. And I'll start out, Orlando, can you let us know what you did at Fresno State?
Yes, we've done a lot, but I think the biggest foundational aspect is we wanted to make sure our students had their basic technology needs met. We are a campus where about 70% of our students are first in their families to be able to attend a college. Over 65% have Pell Grants, and Fresno itself has 2 of the poor zip codes in America. So we already knew right off the bat in early March that broadband internet access and device access would be really, really important. Fortunately, we have a fairly large mobile initiative where we have iPads that are readily available. So we were fortunate to have about 4,000 loaner iPads available for a student class size of approximately 25,000, or a student population size. And that really helped a lot. We did have to ramp up to get eventually over 1,400 hotspots to be able to offer to our students. And so that set the foundation where when you're learning remotely and doing that through Zoom, you do need some bandwidth at least to access your lectures. And then when it comes to the tools you need to do your coursework, the topic of virtual computer labs was a big one. And we didn't have one. We've tried many things like Citrix in the past and VMware, and we're tinkering with other tools in the cloud for Azure and AWS. And fortunately, we also met Porto in, I think it was 2018 at EDUCAUSE, and we started to talk and tried to understand what's the differentiating factors. And so as we were thinking through providing access to our students to, of course, specialized Windows software, but even sometimes just even access to Excel or Word or other things, and being able to do that was going to be very important. So the basic computer access first, and then being able to give access to students who otherwise would need to come to campus to physically use one of our computer labs. So that's a little bit of how we got started with our technology needs for students.
Thanks very much. And Matt, can you share your story? What did you do at Northwestern this spring?
So very similar to what Orlando described. We did provide resources for students that might need that. Northwestern is sort of we're in a sort of unique category in that a lot of our students have come with a lot of nice equipment, so that wasn't as much of a concern, but we definitely provided loaner laptops and hotspots for the students that did need that. We were already using a remote desktop solution, and prior to COVID-19, we were evaluating other options and finding ways to better sort of track software usage. And Oporto was on our radar from EDUCAUSE meetings as well. And well, everyone went remote in March, and we spun up. We worked with Max and the Oporto group, and we were able to spin up an environment in about, I don't know, I think 3 weeks, working across several different schools and units at Northwestern University. sort of load all our software into the environment and make it available to the student population.
Okay, thanks, Matt. All right, so Mac, can you speak to the changes that you made at Middlebury?
Yes, so we also have a virtual lab previously that was set up, and it required VPN connection as well as a client to access. And I think that it was a good solution for when a student needed to continue their research and they were home over winter break or something like that. But it really wasn't a solution that we could scale either support-wise or from an infrastructure perspective to meet the need that was caused by students all having to be remote. We were fortunate in that we were just about finished setting up our Porto pilot when it was announced that students were going to be sent off campus. So we decided to kind of scrap the pilot and just jump right into it. We had a few weeks to do that, and we sent out a survey to our faculty asking what their requirements were for teaching. We really wanted to focus first on the absolute requirements and make sure that we were able to deliver on those. So that was our focus, and I think that it worked out really well, and students were able to easily access Porto. So it was a good solution for us, and like I said, we were lucky in that it was almost all set up and tested. I think that we were able to get everything finalized during the extended spring break that we had. So day one of classes, the students the software that students needed was available to them.
Okay, thank you, Mac. That's awesome that you were ahead of the curve when this all happened. Now I'll turn it over to Max, who's worked with many of you on the implementation, to talk about how you were able to make this shift.
Hey everybody. This question will be directed at Orlando at first. And Orlando, I wanted to know what drove your decision to implement virtual computer labs?
Yes, there are a few aspects, and pre-COVID-19, I would say that we were already starting to think about the high technical debt, we'll call it that, where we knew that there were many computers, and I think our final tally was somewhere between 1,200 to 1,400 computers across a campus that were quote unquote computer labs. And so we were thinking about how much that cost that would be to replace everything. And knowing that there were some specialized computer labs connected to microscopes, or it could have been Microsoft Windows 98 or something else where we just needed to keep certain things running, or it could have been large plot printers, for example. So all of those were considerations as we were thinking about, well, should we do it? Also, space is always short at our institution. So thinking about reclaiming space as our student population size has gone up for the past number of years, our campus space and our footprint of being able to build buildings was another big consideration of potentially virtualizing computer labs. So we did have a lot of great conversations with our campus leadership, including the provost and the deans, and those were key factors in trying to get this momentum going. So I would say many of our considerations were based on long-term financial sustainability and space planning.
Great, thank you. Matt, this question is for you as well. What do you think drove the decision to implement virtual computer labs at Northwestern?
So I think we're slightly different in that we're very interested in the notion of gaining back space with the implementation of virtual computer labs, but we're not quite there yet. Why we implemented Porto is it had a very unique perspective around providing a classroom type interface for students. So we haven't found another product that does that, and so that was very compelling, and it really fit for this particular time. The other sort of goal that we really have is we want to understand who's using what software and when, so we can appropriately buy it at the right level. So today there's a lot of ad hoc software usage in use in the College of Arts and Sciences and across the university. And a platform like Porto, our hope is that it will really help us understand, oh, we have 45 people a day using Stata, and so that means we want to buy at this level, whereas right now people may just be buying tons of copies that aren't being leveraged. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Max, can we insert a question here? How well does Oporto handle graphics intensive software?
So do you want me to take that, or do you want someone else to grab it? I'll just take it. So at Northwestern, we have several different schools using, sort of bundled together using the environment. So I already mentioned College of Arts and Sciences, where I live. We have a School of Communication who's also leveraging this, and the engineering school. And everyone came back. So the School of Communication is an interesting sort of construct at Northwestern. They do communication disorders, speech or auditory, as well as radio and film. So a lot of the applications that they were using were graphics intensive, and they were very pleased with what it was able to do. It's not local. It won't be the same as if you had a local GPU in front of you, but it was very passable. And some people were really happy with how it worked. I hope that helps.
Yep.
All right,
If you don't mind, I'm going to add a couple things
sure.
here, Max. Matt, thanks for sharing that. Service, of course, the service quality, being able to offer more services, and even, let's say, 24-hour labs as opposed to the physical labs, which there may be constraints. I would say that's a key factor, as Chris will probably share with you, Chris at Fresno State will share with you. Being able to provide the best tool for our students was absolutely essential. I think what's interesting is, depending on who you're trying to convince and get buy-in from, the campus leadership is thinking, of course, finances and thinking of space planning, and the students, they could care less. I think they're just wanting the best tools for their education to be able to have that experience, graduate, and go on. And so I think as we are trying to think through and playing that person in the middle, depending on the audience we're speaking with, the reason why we implement computer labs may be different.
Thank you, Rolando. So during COVID, you guys had to make a lot of fast and quick decisions. So Mac, I'm going to ask you this. What were some of the key requirements for virtual computer labs that you had to address?
Thanks, Max. Yeah, so we were thinking about this kind of prior to COVID even, and then COVID made us, it forced us to make some decisions quickly. I think that something that was important was ease of use for students to be able to access this software, as well as increasing the flexibility of students accessing software they can put on their own computers. So the fact that you can just go to a browser, use single sign-on to authenticate, and then launch a desktop with your organization's applications is really powerful. Our previous solution, which definitely worked well, it required VPN access as well as a client. And when we would send out the instructions to students to install that, there'd usually be some back and forth. It was a long document with small text explaining how everything worked. And with Oporto, if we get a question on access, we send a link and some really brief instructions, and the response is almost always immediately, "I'm in, thank you so much, this looks great," or something along those lines. So it's really cut down on the amount of support required to get students access to the tool. So I think that was one of the major things that we were looking for, as well as the fact that Oporto is an off-the-shelf solution. There's nothing that we really needed to stand up ourselves on campus to get this working, and that's why we were able to get it up and running at scale so quickly when COVID hit, because there wasn't that much to do other than set up the connection to our software licensing servers. So those two things were both really important, as well as all the other performance related, quality related things that anyone would look for in a solution. So I think that, yeah, flexibility and ease of use were top of the list for us.
Great, thanks. And what about you, Chris?
Oops, Chris, you're on mute.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Max.
Right.
All right, thanks, Max. Thanks, Heather. So at Fresno State, we were lucky enough to do the research back in 2017. We're actually looking at several application streaming, desktop streaming services, and we had a task force and work groups, look at the different services, and we were able to pilot some of them. and look into the requirements of the others as well. In 2018, we were able to pilot Oporto and also get feedback from key people, from faculty, staff, and students, and we were able to survey them and get some ratings, get some feedback, and on many aspects of our decision table that we created. Some of those I'd like to share here. Some of the more common ones. I know Mac mentioned ease of use. Ease of use was definitely on top of the list. The performance, the reliability, the availability, and the cloud connectivity, for example, was important. And then the one thing that was also really important was the accessibility component of it. We actually had a accessibility representative within our work group, and he was able to test things out for students that have vision impairment or hearing challenges, and they were able to test screen readers to see, how it worked in an application streaming environment. So those are factored into our decision making. And then going down, some of the, I guess, other factors that were really important to us were things like access and permissions, accessibility, as I mentioned, the analytics we were really interested in. We wanted to be able to see and generate reports and send those to key leaders, so that way that helps them understand and make decisions. The availability and risk management was important to us. How reliable is the system, and is there any failover system that is 100% available? We like the fact that Oporto uses AWS or Azure as their background, and those are very robust, redundant systems, and the fact that they use those kind of applies to their availability and also contributes to the risk management component of deciding on Oporto. Cloud drive connectivity was important. The overall cost, we looked at the total cost, of course, and one of the things that we looked there is just the total cost of Oporto, as well as comparing it to other types of services that are the same or similar, and also looking at and comparing the total cost of running and maintaining a physical computer lab, and comparing the two. We also looked into other things such as, are the costs true? Are there hidden costs? Are there things that we don't see? Is the cost that is stated accurate? So we looked at that in their calculations. We also had conversations with other universities that have been using Oporto, just to see if those cost statements were true. And that's one of the things that we looked at that would help us understand overall costs with Oporto, as opposed to developing your own system in-house or using a similar service. Engagement was important to us. How engaged is the company with its customers? The implementation ease was also important. With resources limited, do we have to hire additional people to implement a service like this, or can we, get it up and running with very minimal or no additional staffing required? We looked at incentives for a pilot. Is it going to cost us to run the pilot? IT support costs, we looked into that. License management was a big deal, just because we wanted to make sure we stay in line with licensing contracts with our software vendors, and make sure we have an effective way of managing those and controlling those licenses. Performance of sports is important.
We have a question in the panel on licensing, Chris, and maybe you can just take it directly. Were there any licensing issues with allowing students to connect to Oporto to access applications with up to 5 devices for each student? These solutions in the past have been very costly.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the things that we've learned is licensing is always a challenge. I think given the COVID-19 situation, one of the things that was beneficial is many of the software vendors kind of relaxed on their requirements. Of course, that's not a long-term type of solution. But one of the things that we did to control licensing is to make sure our connection to our license servers on campus, and also communication with those license server administrators were clear. That way it would help manage and control the amount of licenses that are distributed. I apologize, my kids are in the background. You hear that? And then the other thing too is within Aporto has some tools that allows you to manage how many licenses are, how many licenses are distributed at any one time. Gotta love kids.
Yeah, you're fine.
So those things, having your secure tunnel, make sure it's set up correctly, having your license servers. Usually license servers are controlled or managed by several administrators around campus, making sure you have clear communication with them and understand what your goal is, what you're trying to do, and then making sure that those contracts that you have, you're within line of those contracts in terms of thinking for the long term. The other thing too that helped is a lot of the faculty actually reached out to the vendors directly to see if they would offer temporary licenses to their students, so students can install them locally on their devices. That kind of helped as well. But those students that were not or don't have access to a device or don't have a device that's capable of installing that software, Aporto would be a good solution for it. And then there's other factors in here. I probably don't have time to talk about all of them, but one thing that was really important to us is the roadmap of the company. Roadmap meaning, what's the mission of the company? Where will they go in 5 years? One of the concerns we had with Aporto is that it's a small company, and if we go with them and looking at other companies, smaller companies have been, acquired by other larger companies, and a lot of times their pricing model changes, and we were concerned about that. If we commit with Aporto for now, for example, will their pricing model change if they get acquired by a company? We thought roadmap was important. We like the fact that Anthony, he takes ownership of the company. And he has a hands-on approach. He speaks to his customers directly, and we like how engaged he is. So that was a factor in terms of applying towards our decision criteria and making a decision to go with Aporto. But other than that, that's what I have. I have positives and negatives, and I can talk about those later if you have questions.
I do have a couple questions here. Max, if you don't mind, I'll put some out. For those who have implemented this already, how is the screen view feature for teachers when they want to view their student screens? Students will often have questions about the lab and need to show the professor their work.
Yes, is that a question for me? I apologize.
Anybody, that's great. Go for it.
So we had an opportunity to beta test Classroom View, which allows the professor to see in a grid pattern updates in real time the student screens. We had some it's very encouraging, but I think there's areas there that can be worked on and improved, and we're working with Aporto side by side to see if that service, like Classroom View Beta, will be a very useful tool in fall.
Hey, Kelly.
Max, do you want to add anything? Sorry.
I was just going to add, so I'm a product manager here at Aporto, and so there are a couple different ways to share screens and collaborate. The regular screen sharing that a student can do on their own, like to just send a link to the professor, we've had that in place for a number of years, and that's straightforward and really easy to use. What we did in the spring is create a classroom view where we do that at scale, like with 20 or 30 users. And that's where that was in beta. And there were issues with that, especially when you have low bandwidth. So in the past month, our engineers have been redesigning the classroom to operate at scale. And we're currently doing a lot of load testing to make sure that that works seamlessly, knowing that there's now a lot of interest for the classroom in the fall.
I'm going to ask a few more questions, Max. Sorry, just give me a couple more minutes. Was information security policy revised in order to accommodate cloud VDI for lab use? Was there any disclaimers or education on what content could be hosted in this environment?
So I'll try to answer that from a more broad perspective. During our sort of negotiations with the Puerto, the Northwestern security group did review them and run them through several security assessments. I believe the company is rated all the way to HIPAA data. Where Northwestern landed is we're not quite there with HIPAA, just in part because of the time that we needed to get the platform up and running. I think we will be moving back to complete that assessment so that our medical school can start using the environment. But we're okay with it for class data, student data, staff who are trained using FERPA data through the platform.
And I think we answered, or Chrissy touched on this a little bit, but this question's for Orlando. What other virtual lab products did you consider?
So we started many moons ago with Citrix, and it served some purpose. It was okay, but we dropped that soon after. We've also looked into more recently Azure, and the Cal State system was trying to look at that together to see if we could make it some kind of center for excellence. That has produced mixed results. AWS AppStream is a pretty good alternative, and we are actually still exploring AppStream as a backup solution. We're building up in-house expertise, but I think it speaks to the point as to what we're trying to also achieve in balancing in-house expertise versus what's available with at least Amazon. We do have to build up that expertise. We still have to tackle all the same licensing challenges, but it might save us some money. And so right now we're comparing pros and cons for each product. We really appreciate Aporto because it's kind of the best, in some ways, the out-of-the-box experience. There is a startup time still, of course, but just all the features very focused toward higher ed, and the connection with people right now at Aporto who appreciate higher ed and are really willing to work with us. So those are some of the main approaches we have right now. So we're pretty much down to Aporto and AWS at this point in time.
Awesome, that takes care of another question here. And then I do not have a question. I just wanted to say hi to Matt C. This is Terry J in Portland. Go Wildcats.
Hey, Terry.
Max, back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Those are all great answers. Orlando, wanted to ask you about how you dealt with the unplanned expense during the COVID issue. So something like this as a solution is obviously unplanned in that sense. So what budgetary restraints did you have, or what steps did you take to help you gain the budget that you needed?
I'll take that response into two phases, short term and long term. So even before COVID, we were thinking about how we would afford something like this. So first and foremost, we do not have student technology fees. And I know some of us on the phone listening, on the webinar listening right now, some of us do and some of us don't. For us, without a student technology fee, one obvious course of action is for longer term sustainability. Okay, let's see what it would take to implement a student technology fee. And that comes with some challenges. If you're in a state system, the balance between tuition and fees and what you get from the state is always a challenge. And if you're at a private institution, where I've come from before as well, it may be a little easier to do. So I think that's the challenge if we're thinking long term. Short term, I think the answer was pretty straightforward. We were in an emergency. We fortunately had as a state institution as well, we had the CARES Act funding, which came from the federal government, and that was able to get us over the hump, at least in the short term. Now, we didn't necessarily count on getting that because the decision was made in March before CARES Act was finalized. So we were thinking if we couldn't do anything else, we would tap into our reserves. We would try to apply for FEMA funding later on. And so as we head into the fall with certainty of CARES Act, that's going to sustain us for the fall. But beyond that, as Chris was also implying, we want to look for a long-term solution that will really benefit our campus. And so we are thinking through student technology fees, we're thinking through other aspects, we're thinking through cost savings if we don't refresh our labs. So working through this with the provost, who's my colleague on the cabinet, as well as with the deans, where we think if we had broad adoption, maybe everyone chips in as another alternative. So everything's on the table at this point in time.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Orlando. Back to you, Heather.
Okay. All right, so the next part of this is lessons learned. Since it was a very rapid shift, you probably did things really quickly, and if you were to do it all over again, you might do some things differently. So we're curious, what has been your experience? What were some of the biggest learnings from using the virtual computer lab? And we'll start with Chris.
Hi, thanks, Heather. Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to give kudos to the Oporto engineers. During the pandemic, we went from the pilot stage to the full-blown stage of implementing Oporto, and we already had data which helped us in understanding, the most important components or applications that were needed by colleges around the university. But during that time, we were trying to accommodate everyone as much as possible. And we reached out to all the colleges and schools again, and we asked them for their list of software that they use in their computer labs. And we wound up, not counting the suites by themselves as one, but individual apps within those suites, it came out to like 70. I like to mention that because a suite can have, large components of applications in there, and those applications on their own. And things, especially with Adobe, for example, or Autodesk Suite. Those pose some challenges in terms of getting them configured correctly. Sometimes there's bugs that you have to understand, and you also have to understand how users will utilize the service. But in terms of implementing that software, it was a good experience, I'd say, given the situation. And I think what I'd say as far as a tip is staying as organized as possible. Using tools as much as possible, online tools as much as possible. If you have Google Suites, use that to communicate, get that Google Sheets up, so that way you guys can see and understand what's been installed, what's having problems, and what the current status is a huge I guess piece of advice I would recommend. And staying as organized and keeping that communication line as open as possible, and not just with the Oporto, but with your colleagues, and especially the ones that are requesting and requiring the software, and making sure once it's been installed, having your colleagues test it and make sure they provide feedback. And then another component I would say is making sure your secure tunnel and your license servers are in line. And where there need to be firewalls, and the rules are adjusted to allow virtual type of instructions. And then I guess what I would do differently is, if I were to do it again, is make that list shorter. So I would have used maybe the top 10 that would affect maybe 80 to 90% of the students on campus, and then the rest of the apps I would phase in later. The one thing that I liked about Oporto is when I did phase in some of the apps that I wasn't able to do initially, it took about 24 to 48 hours, which is very fast in terms of getting the software up and running. Usually they do it over the weekend, so by Monday we'll be ready. So.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. So pivoting a little bit, Matt, do you have any advice for internally advocating or training your staff and faculty on how to use the virtual computer labs?
Yeah, so I think an important aspect of that is being able to prove the value of the tool whenever you're advocating for something. So we did a survey for our students after the spring semester, and I think over 90% of the students said that Oporto met their needs, and over 80, I think it was around 85%, said that they would like for Oporto to continue to be available to them even when they are back on campus using labs as they normally would. So with both of those two statistics, I think that it's clear that this is a tool that students value. I think they value it for the reasons I was mentioning before, because it's so easy to get onto it. It performs well, and it allows for more flexible use of software. You don't have to trek across campus. And in Vermont, we get a lot of snow. So in January, when you're walking across campus to the computer lab, when there's 3 feet of snow, it's not quite as nice as other times. So you can just do it from your room or from a dining hall or something like that. It's much more flexible. And then in addition to that, I think that there are really clear there's potential for reusing space in different ways, and I think a few other people have mentioned that on this call. You can remove computers from labs on campus potentially, and kind of re-envision the space and make it more flexible. And I think that the other thing to focus on is kind of the more general use, and kind of acknowledge the fact that there will be some kind of specialized lab usage that's going to be valuable on an ongoing basis. So not also approach it suggesting that one size meets all and we can get rid of all of our labs on campus.
Thank you. Okay. I'm from Vermont, by the way, so I remember that snow.
You've trekked through that snow, yeah.
Yeah. So the last question here for Matt. What was the student response? What feedback did you hear from students regarding the photo?
You said Matt, not Mac, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, this is for you, Matt.
So everything really has been very positive. So the first phase was, get this out and make it available, and people have been happy. One of our big needs was to make ArcGIS available to several classes that were going to be using that in the fall, and we've gotten really good feedback from the group. All in all, we've tracked about, I don't know, I'm going to say 40 tickets for help, and most of those were really access related. And by access, I mean we created that classroom in a particular way, which led to us having to grant permissions. So if I had to go back to lessons learned, I would say really think about how you're providing access to the applications and try to streamline that as much as possible. So that error really wasn't, I wouldn't put that on Oporto. I would put that on sort of on me, I guess, and sort of trying to get too fancy with something that you needed to get out the door today. But right, feedback's been great, and in the next quarter, we're going to really try to work on the license view, the classroom view, and sort of really moving sort of up the sophistication of usage on the platform. I know that isn't quite what you asked, but
that's okay. Yeah, thanks for your feedback. This is good. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Max.
Thanks, Heather. This last set of questions is for Mac, Matt, and Orlando. And it's kind of what I'm really looking for is what your vision is beyond COVID-19 for virtual computer labs. And so, Mac, do you think that virtual computer labs will be used more after COVID-19? Do you think that that type of solution will be able to stick around post COVID-19 and when things start to reopen?
Yeah, I absolutely do, and it's something that we were looking at prior to COVID-19 as well. So there's definitely interest, and you know, people realize that there's value in this kind of solution for all the reasons that we've been talking about. You know, we absolutely had to use it for the last few months, but this is also going to be it's an example of you know, being able to expose people to a new tool or a new kind of technology that then they're going to continue to use. I mean, that's definitely what I foresee happening. And certainly in the fall, we're going to have perhaps even higher needs for Porto usage still because of COVID, just because vendors are not going to be giving out as much free software, I don't think. But after that, I certainly anticipate continued use. I think that people more and more want to use their own laptops. I mean, I think that we've all walked into a lab and seen mouse and keyboard pushed out of the way and someone sitting there on their own laptop. You know, being able to walk into a classroom and sit wherever you want and launch these kind of applications on your computer would be preferred, I think, by anyone who had a computer and could use their computer for that purpose. So I certainly see it as an option, and supporting software on Porto's platform is much less effort than preparing 50 computers per lab for classes every semester.
Thanks, Mac. Matt, this is for you. Do you think that after COVID that virtual labs will be used more for collaboration or active learning type of approaches?
Time will tell on that, at least at the Northwestern community level. Again, our long-term goals are to really sort of find a platform that helps us understand software usage at the university level, and then help us sort of manage that and distribute that software throughout. Something that I'll share with the group is, which led us to Puerto in some senses, our focus isn't, again, much on virtual labs, although that'd be great if we get the space back and people like the solution. We are really looking for ways to provide Windows-based research software out to faculty and students who don't want to purchase that software individually and access it. And Puerto's been a really good sort of fit so far. One drawback with the tool is, it's just how it's designed, is you only have so much time of inactivity in your session before it closes. And so we're working with Puerto to sort of understand how to expand that where cost becomes reasonable for both parties. So, and what I mean by that is we have faculty members or student researchers that may want to run an analysis that goes for 24 hours. And how do we do that without it shutting down? And so we're working on that problem. Maybe find me in Thanksgiving, and I'll let you know where we're at with that.
Thanks, Matt. And this last question is for you, Orlando. After COVID, do you think that virtual labs will be used to help solve the BYOD approach?
Yeah, we really sure hope so. I would say that even, again, before COVID, we were looking for solutions, and a lot of it is where we just don't have either the student personnel or permanent staff to have a 24-hour lab, safety reasons, among other things. And we would love to see a virtual lab be offered to our students to be able to do work. And as we've all mentioned before, having that continuity of having something maybe run all day without needing to sit in front of the screen is a really great option to have. And so that's something we hope to achieve one day as well. We also talked about, for Fresno State, many of our students may not have the greatest computer. And yes, they go to a physical lab, but sometimes that's not convenient. Some of our students live maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes away. So having the ability for them to use, maybe it's their phone even, hopefully it's not just their phone, but it might be that, or one of the iPads that we have to offer, a 9.7-inch screen is not great, but at the same time, you could still do a lot. And so we hope to see features, as Chris has mentioned as well, that help with the accessibility of being able to either zoom in or do other things that help with smaller screen sizes. And our low bandwidth requirement is also very important. Students will be bringing things and having tools that optimize the experience. I know that Porto added a network analyzer to help people understand if the bandwidth might be an issue as well. So We really appreciate seeing these changes to help improve the student experience. So absolutely, these tools, including virtual lab tools, will really greatly benefit our students, where BYOD is very important in our future.
Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to, I guess, the audience, if anybody has any questions.
The last question that came in, I'm not sure that you can all see the answers to this, but the question was, how does Aporto converge with training management systems or learning management systems such as Canvas? And the answer is we do use Canvas's LTI integration and integrate well with that.
And I can add a little bit to that, Kelly. So we have the integration with Canvas already, and in progress, we're working with D2L Brightspace and Blackboard, and hope to have those up and running very soon too.
Yeah, so at Northwestern, we're happy to use, we just use Canvas. It was sort of a kismet, I guess, and we are going to be fully integrating using the LTI within the next couple of weeks. So I can't really speak to how well it works or how the integration is, but our goal is to have that available so that we can delegate some administrative rights out to lecturers and faculty members so that they can sort of mark off resources for their classes, which is a feature that wasn't discussed, but it's something that I think is really appealing about the Aporto environment.
And Heather, you mentioned Blackboard, but I think it was a little bit hard to hear you. Did you have a timing on that? That question just came in.
Yeah, so we are aiming for by fall semester. Where we are specifically, we've established a partnership with Blackboard, and our engineers, the first step is they're working on setting up a sandbox so that they have administrative access. We already have an LTI integration, so our assumption is that it's just a matter of tweaking. It already works for Canvas. We think there are only going to be a small number of changes to make it work for Blackboard and other LMSs. And also, if this is helpful, one of the really key benefits of integrating Aporto into your LMS is that you can automatically pass all the group and role information. And that will enable you to take advantage of more features within Aporto, particularly the collaboration features. It also makes it a lot easier for your students already in the LMS. They have all of their course content. If we simply add a link out to Aporto, it just becomes another resource within your LMS, and your students can easily access the software that they need to do their homework.
Another question, any timeline for Moodle integration?
Okay, we've heard one other request for Moodle. We haven't looked at that yet, but I will make a note to set up, reach out to them to get access. So my guess is since we're getting ready for our August release, I'm not sure if it would fit in before the August release. So it would likely be something that would come early in the fall. It takes us, my guess is it would probably be about 3 weeks from the time we've set up a partnership.
Okay, so it looks like that's all the questions, and we're coming up on the hour. So I wanted to thank all the panelists again, Matthew, Mac, Chris, and Orlando. We really appreciate the time. Heather and Max, on the screen, I've put their direct emails if you'd like to contact them directly. And then a couple of other notes. You can do a sort of a test drive of the virtual computer lab by just going to our website /trial. And also happy to do private demo sessions for you and your team. You can either contact Max or Heather directly or fill out the contact us form. And we will be doing write-ups of the universities we talked about today, as well as other customers on our LinkedIn page. So If you'd like to follow us on LinkedIn, you'll get access to some additional university stories and see how things are going as we move closer to the fall and through the fall. I am going to ask this one last question. Do we have a call center to assist faculty and students? And yes, we absolutely have 24/7 support.
And I'll add that we've been working with Max again and the Aporto team to sort of integrate that into our central help desk support team. And so far everyone's been happy with what's provided on the Aporto side. We're just implementing that, and it'll sort of allow tickets to flow in and out of both systems to address student needs.
Nice.
Find me around Thanksgiving if you're curious.
We will check back in. All right, thank you everybody for your time. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.